Hey, what's up everybody? Hammerheart Metal Reviews here once again doing another discography countdown for you today. And this one is by request. I took your votes, your voices were heard, and we are going to be doing a Gorguts discography ranking for you today. So yeah, these guys are from Quebec, Canada, just absolute death metal legends in the Canadian scene. Started out more in like the old school death metal vein, but became more of a technical avant-garde death metal beast, really with their own unique sound. Been active from 1989 to the present day, although they haven't put out a new album in quite some time. The last full length was from 2013, so who knows if we'll get any more material. I sure hope so. But yeah, there's only 5 albums, so this isn't going to be a super long discography ranking. Mastermind behind the band, Luc Lemay, just absolute musical genius here. Does guitar and vocals, main songwriter. And yeah, just the way that he writes these songs is so off the beaten path. Like, this is not straight ahead stuff at all, other than maybe the first couple albums are a little more in the straight ahead old school death metal vein. But by the time that third album rolls around, they completely threw a curveball at everyone, and it just, yeah, went full on avant-garde, experimental, technical death metal. Where on the first few albums, they still had those technical abilities. You could still tell that they could play. But yeah, it went completely different direction by that third album. But such an influential and unique band. And yeah, all 5 of these albums absolutely kick ass. This is an almost impossible ranking. This is a flawless discography. Like, I know what going into this, I knew what my number 1 was gonna be, and it still has changed. Like, hasn't changed. It's easily my favorite Gorguts album, and I'll get to that when I get to the top spot. But the other 4 spots, like, I've been flip-flopping, re-listened to all of these, and it's still just so hard to rank these. Like, if I do this again tomorrow, I'd probably switch a couple spots. I keep like tweaking my list. It's so tough. Like I said, I know what my number 1 is because it's the one I listened to by far the most out of all of them. But from 5 down to 2, these could switch spots. So if you see something coming in 5th and it's going to blow your mind, oh, how is he putting that in 5th? That's my favorite. Well, it's just because all of these kick so much ass. So don't get offended, but all your opinions are welcome anyways. I like to get conversations going. So enough rambling. Let's get into this. Let's see what this impossible ranking brings out from me. So coming in 5th place, let's see, is this going to bring some controversy? I don't know. I'm going with their 3rd album, Obscura, from 1998. So this is the album where they really started experimenting a lot. So, like I said, putting this in 5th does not mean I don't like this album. I really enjoy it. It's just something that had to come 5th, and it's very tough when I'm comparing these albums right beside each other. But this is just a masterpiece of like dissonant, complex, and strange death metal. Very experimental and very technical, but it's not just death metal. Like, there's elements of other genres interspersed there. Like, you hear jazz influence, sludge. Like, there's so much stuff going on here incorporated in with the base of death metal. But it's just truly a unique album with excellent musicianship on display throughout. The songwriting is so creative. It's really got these like odd, disjointed chord progressions, but it does really work. Like, it's very strange, especially the first time you listen to it. Might take a few times to really digest everything that's going on, but it's really unpredictable. You never really know what's coming next. I guess my only knock on this, the reason why I put this 5th, is that I do feel it might be a little bit over long for how crazy and complex these riffs are. It is over an hour in length. I feel like there might have been a couple spots where things could have been trimmed. The song Clouded being an example. It's a pretty long track. Feel like that one could have been shortened a little bit, but that's just nitpicking. I absolutely love this album still. I'm just kind of trying to explain why I have this in 5th compared to some other albums. If I had to pick favorite tracks off here, Earthly Love, Nostalgia, Faceless Ones, all in all, this is still a very awesome album. In at 5th isn't a knock on it. It's just because their whole discography rules. Let's move this right along. Up next at number 4, I'm going with their most recent album, which was from 2013, Colored Sands. So this was their first album in 12 years. Like, that's a long break in between, but they did not miss a beat. This is an absolutely triumphant return. It's got so much going on. This brought in a new drummer, John Longstreth, of course, of so many bands like Angel Corpse, Origin, Hate Eternal, Dim Mak, just super accomplished death metal drummer. And he fits in with Luc Lemay's sound perfectly here. It's just got like percussive madness throughout this album and these awesome bass lines as well. And once again, unique and aggressive riffs, but that are also balanced with like these very tranquil, almost peaceful moments. And the way that it all blends together is just an absolute masterpiece. Like, the fact that I have this in 4th is just a testament to how strong their whole discography is, because I absolutely love this album. It was in my top 10 albums of 2013, and that year was fucking stacked with great metal albums. So the fact that this made my top 10 just shows how much I love it, but it's still only at number 4. That's just how good this discography is. If I have to pick favorite songs, the opener, La Toi du Monde, probably mispronouncing. My French is not so good, so I apologize. Forgotten Arrows is another standout track, but yeah, all in all, very, very solid album, in at number 4. Up next at number 3, let's go with the album right before that, the one that's sandwiched in between Obscura and Colored Sand, From Wisdom to Hate from 2001. So this was a few years after Obscura, and I feel like it was pretty much a continuation of the same style, so it didn't really land as much of a curveball as Obscura did. That one came out left field, but whereas this one, you kind of knew what to expect, but it's more like abstract and strange song constructions, very technical and unique. But I do find, compared to Obscura, there's a little more breathing room on this album. It's more of a direct approach, although it's still very unconventional. Saying direct is not necessarily the right word here. Compared to Obscura, it's more of a direct songwriting approach, but it's still very unique and experimental. But the reason I have this at number 3 over Obscura and Colored Sands is that I just feel there's more like standout and memorable tracks that if I like just try to think of the riffs, these songs are in my head, like ingrained forever. Whereas with like Obscura and Colored Sands, yeah, once I put the album back on, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember all these riffs, this is great. But if I just try to like necessarily remember the songs, this album stands out more in my mind. Maybe it's just me, maybe I've listened to this album a little bit more than the other ones, but yeah, that's why it's edging those other two out by a hair. It's very close, but yeah, favorite songs on here, Inverted, The Quest for Equilibrium, absolutely love that track. Elusive Treasures, another absolute standout. Like, this is a really, really solid album. That's why it's in at number 3. So that just leaves their first 2 albums. These are ones that were a little less experimental than where they went later. This is more in the old school death metal approach, but I guess that's just my personal taste, is that I love the old school death metal a little more than the experimental stuff. Not to say I don't like the later stuff, I absolutely love it, but these first 2 are death metal classics. What order am I gonna put them in? Let's find out right now. Coming in at number 2, I am going with the debut, Considered Dead, from 1991. This is, like I said, old school death metal classic. This was produced by Scott Burns at Morris Sound. Of course, well-known producer, had his hands in so many absolute classic death metal albums, and this one is no exception. Like I said, this one's not quite as unique as later albums, but man, these songs just kill. Like, maybe this is not doing anything vastly different than a lot of other death metal that was out in the early 90s, but these songs really stand the test of time. This is more of the traditional death metal approach, very riff-driven with great vocals, and yeah, it just has that early 90s typical death metal sound, but I love that early 90s typical death metal sound, and it's executed really well here. Favorite tracks, Stiff and Cold, the title track, Considered Dead, is awesome. Raw Anatomy features some guest backing vocals from Chris Barnes from Cannibal Corpse. Inoculated Life features an awesome guest solo from James Murphy, who played in Death and Obituary. Just all in all, absolute classic. If you have this even higher, totally makes sense. But for me, my number 1, my favorite Gorguts album, this was an easy choice for me, although I've said this ranking was very difficult. My number 1 for me was not difficult. I love this album to death. Easily my favorite Gorguts album, which is their sophomore output from 1993, The Erosion of Sanity. So here they kind of took the basis of what they did on Considered Dead, but started to change it up a little bit, starting to forge their own identity. It was a nice step forward from the debut. I feel like the songwriting got a little bit better, and they started infusing these like subtle melodies amongst the brutal technical death metal riffing. Whereas, yeah, it's very brutal on one hand, but then you hear this underlying melody underneath, and it's just very unique. There's pinch harmonics everywhere on this album, which I absolutely love. It suits it so well. And the riffs and like the patterns are really awesome. It's really intricate songs, even still while maintaining that old school death metal feel. So it kind of gave you like hints of maybe some more technical and experimental stuff to come later on. But this one's still very much just rooted in old school death metal, although the riffs are technical as well. But this is just absolutely top-notch stuff here. Whole album, front to back, absolutely kills. Like I said, easily my favorite Gorguts album. Favorite tracks on here: With Their Flesh, He'll Create. Condemned to Obscurity has this really nice piano part, which you don't really hear in death metal, but man, they incorporate it so well. Odors of Existence, Dormant Misery, just all front to back, absolute masterpiece. That's why it's in at #1 for me. Anyways, these are just my opinions as usual. Love to get your thoughts down below. What are your favorite Gorguts albums? Or give me your ranking of all 5. It's only 5, so that doesn't take too long to do, but always love to get some conversations going, and I'd love to hear your opinions on this awesome Canadian band. So anyways, until next time, Hammerheart Metal Reviews, out!